it was fascinating to like have this real open conversation with other women and see the shift in even just the depth of relationship that happened with the women in that room. I mean, even just looking at that, like creating the safety in relationships for you to be able to open up to your friends like that, that level of depth of safety in that is a whole other conversation. Hello, Dr. Stephanie. I am so honored to have you here.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
I know. I think we kind of stumbled across each other on Facebook or somewhere, and your title or your like Instagram bio, like all that, like between the sheets was like, "Ooh, I want to know a little bit more about this. Like, let's dive in a little bit." And I know when we had our conversation before, I was like, okay, this is definitely a topic that we could go deeper on. So I am so honored to have you here. I
Thank
know.
you. Yeah.
You'll go, yeah. So I know a lot of times we kind of find our way in the world and we find ourselves in, like, I never thought that I would be talking about menstrual cycles. Like, that was never in my life, something that I thought I would be talking and sharing about. But here I am. I'm curious, like, what has been your journey to getting that place of like really talking about sexual health and, all the things down there between the sheets?
Yeah, absolutely. So, for me, it's been a journey. I was a nurse for many years, went back to get my nurse practitioner degree. I've had several jobs as a nurse practitioner, and I was in primary care and just loathing it. I really don't care that you woke up with a cold this morning. Like, call me in 7 days if it hasn't gone away, right? Like, primary care is not for me. And so I was looking for anything. And one of my friends worked for the company that I now work for and was like, hey, we have openings, like just apply. This fits your personality. I promise you'll love it, whatever. And so I got the job in urology. And they were right. Like, it totally fits my personality. I have no shame or guilt talking about anything related to our private areas, our private lives, things like that. And I was lucky enough that I'm in an office where I work with a couple surgeons who do penile implants. I work with a urogynecologist who does reconstructive surgeries for women in their vaginas and with prolapse and things like that. And so I really got to explore sexual medicine, and it's just such an amazing area of life to help people with, right? Some people are very scared to talk about it. Some people are nervous to talk about certain aspects or certain desires they might have. And kind of, especially in a medical setting, you come into the clinic, you don't really want to talk about your sex life, or you're not expecting to. But there's more that I need to know than just you're having pain with sex, or you're having an erectile dysfunction, or your husband's having the erectile dysfunction, or whatever. And the changes we go through as women throughout our lives and our various different cycles of early teenage, periods are all over the place, and then being early moms, late moms, menopause, all these different phases we go through as women, and how much our body and our desires change. And being able to help people with this is really exciting. So that's really how I got into it. And now, I do the podcast to be able to talk about sexual health from a variety of standpoints. I've had physical therapists, I've had sex therapists, sex coaches, sexologists, other urologists. So we do cover a variety of topics, just really digging into sexual health and putting it out there so it's not taboo to talk about. And if you're struggling with how to bring something up to your partner, you can say, hey, listen to this episode, and then let's talk afterwards, right? Like, it gives you
Yeah.
kind of a starting point.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's probably one of those things. Like, I know any of those veins. Like, I remember going out to a happy hour with a bunch of girlfriends, and somewhere, I don't even know how the conversation got started, but we were all talking about like different things in our sex life. And I learned so much about every other woman that was at that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we don't normally talk like this. Like, people aren't talking like this, but like the conversation and the openness that we had in that one session, like, I left. I mean, to be totally honest, I was mind blown by some of the women there. I was like,
Yeah.
I never would have pictured you as that. Like, it just didn't ever come across. So it was one of those, like you said, it's one of those conversations that like people just don't talk about. Like, people, and I will say, I've been in healthcare, I don't know, 15 plus years now at this point, and it's one of those things that, I just went and got my mammogram, and I'm like, as they're like squishing and squeezing on my boob, I'm like, this is normal for them. This is normal for them. They see boobs all the time. Like, I mean, in the NICU, like, I'm holding and helping women's boobs all the time. Like, it becomes this like normalized, and yet at the same time, it's still one of those topics. Like, I was talking to a friend of mine recently about, like, as an OT, sexual health falls under our scope of practice. Rarely do I know any of my coworkers or any of our staff that are actually having those conversations. So
Yeah.
it is one of those things that like we have to be talking about and people just aren't like, and I don't know, like for me personally, I think a lot of it is probably growing up personally was like very religious conversations. And that was a big part of why I didn't talk about it. But I do think there's other societal things. Do you see that happening or do you see it shifting? Do you see, because I feel like personally, more people are talking about different things that weren't talked about before, but I'm not sure if you see it too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, you know, when we grew up, there was a very much a religious purity culture. You were only taught abstinence. You waited till you got married. People who were having sex outside of marriage and things like that, you were frowned upon. You were looked down on. You were dirty. You were all these things. And I have definitely seen a shift in that for both men and women have been more acceptable to participate in whatever type of activities they want to in a consensual setting. And I also think that the availability of internet and our phone and all of those has helped with this too, right? So now we have dating apps. We have porn at our fingertips instead of having to get the VHS or try and watch it on the pay-per-view with all the little like whitewash, you know? And so it's just so much more accessible that I think people are talking about it a little bit more. But it's still, I mean, I have dinner with some of my girlfriends and we'll start, you know, I always poke the bear because I can. So I kind of try and get us into some of these conversations. And just a couple months ago, a friend of mine who's in her 40s like I am, and she's never used a vibrator. And I'm like, what on earth are you wasting your life on? Like, here, please take one of the ones I have, like, you know, or here's a new one, whatever. But like, it's so interesting to me how it is still taboo for some people to talk about. I do see the younger generations being better about that than us. You know, Gen Z, they talk about sex more openly. They're willing to have conversations about STIs and when they got tested and all of those things more so than we were comfortable with that. You know, for us, it was like this hush hush, like, here's my labs, like just, you know, barely talking about it. But the younger generations seem to be a little bit more open. And the other thing I find really fun is my older generations in their 70s and 80s opening up to me in their appointments and talking about the intimacy that they have with their partners and whether that includes penetration anymore or not. It might not, but they still have mutual masturbation or they have, you know, they take care of each other in different ways and things like that. So it's really interesting how each generation has different views on it and how they're coming to their appointments and talking about things. So in our generation, HIV, herpes, all of these things were so dramatically like you were an awful person, you were dirty. I mean, look, so many people have the herpes virus, one or two, doesn't matter because one shows up top and down below. Number two shows up down below and up top. So it doesn't matter which one you have. Super controllable, doesn't cause any long-term damage. It's no different than when you had the chicken pox as a kid. It may or may not give you shingles later. Same thing with herpes. You got it. You may or may not ever have an outbreak. You know, we have medicines for it. HIV, you're better off getting that than some of the cancers that are out there at this point in time. You know, the treatment is so well versed. Plus, we have PrEP that you can take if you're in a high risk environment. You know, talking about chlamydia and gonorrhea and just destigmatizing it to say, look, we still want you to wear condoms. We want you to have safe sex. But here's your antibiotic. Get over it. Get yourself better. Tell your partners, get them treated, and then move on with life.
Yeah.
Just because you had gonorrhea as a 22-year-old while you were in college doesn't mean at 32 you need to feel bad about yourself. It happened. It's over. It's treated. Moving on. So I really like that her school is doing a little bit to kind of destigmatize that while also teaching and how to be safe.
Yeah, it's been, and I mean, obviously it's my first like going through this and like feels so foreign for me. Like you said, growing up in this like abstinence culture, there's so many times I like catch myself of this is just how I was taught versus like, is this how I want to teach? And it's this really weird wrestle of like, how do I be really mindful? Like because I do really want her to be safe and I do want her to protect herself and all these things. And yet at the same time, I'm like, I don't want to just come across with the messaging and the conditioning that has been passed down for generations before. So it's been this very like, okay, how are we doing this? Like, what are we talking about? Where are we going? What's this going to look like? Very I don't want to say uncomfortable. I mean, it's discomfort, like in the
Hmm.
sense of unknown
Yeah.
uncomfortable, but not like I don't want to be in this like uncomfortable, but it's been definitely a journey for sure.
Yeah. So my daughter just finished her freshman year of college, and my son is finishing his junior year of high school. And so, all of their friends know what I do, and
Yeah.
it's my house is open questions, and it's
Do
great.
you
I mean,
get lots of questions?
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. They were over, a bunch of kids were over the other night, and one of the girls pulled me aside. She's like, Miss Steph, I heard about squirting. Like, can you tell me if that's a real thing or whatever?
Mm.
I love that they have me to ask because if you go watch porn, every woman squirts. If you don't squirt, you're not doing it right, all these things. And they have no idea.
Yeah.
And so I love that they are all comfortable at this point asking me those questions and having that conversation. I talk to my kids about things, not even just the sex stuff, but how to treat each other. Like I don't want to raise a frat boy that is, banging every girl every other day and then never calling them and treating them like crap. Like, I don't want that for my son, and I don't want my daughter to be treated that way. So I do try and talk about that side
Yeah.
of it too. But I definitely approach sex in more of a, you're going to do it. I know you're going to do it. When you do it is up to you. How you do it, who you do it with is up to you. But I know you're gonna. So let's
Mhm.
just talk about it and answer those questions from a person who understands it medically, physically, emotionally, all of those things, because they just don't get it. And I don't want them
Mhm.
getting it from their friends or from porn.
Mhm. For sure. How long have you been in the area that you're in now? Was it prior to your kids? I mean, obviously
So
the
it's been
junior.
about 4.5 years. So they
Okay.
were like middle school, high school when I got in. Yeah.
So yeah, it was kind of right around this. I was like, gee, I was gonna say, in my mind, I'm like, is there something that you know now that you wish you would have done differently or said differently before you got to that stage?
Yeah. It's interesting because I've even asked the kids this when they're over, like,
Mhm.
what should we, as your parents,
Mhm.
have done differently? And some of it is talking to them a little bit earlier than you even think that you need to because they're so exposed to things
Yeah.
now. And one of the biggest ones is telling them that porn's not real
Mm.
because that's where they're getting a lot of their sex ed. And, having threesomes as a 17-year-old is just, it's not appropriate. It's, listen, I'm not going to judge you, but you need to learn yourself and you need to learn about sex and stuff first before you start exploring all of these wild and crazy things. And a lot of these kids are watching so much porn that they think those things are starting points. They
Mm.
think BDSM is normal and a starting point. And although BDSM is fine and totally great, it needs to be in a consensual relationship. It needs to be explored with safe words and total trust in your partner so that you know that you're safe. These kids don't know how to do that yet.
Yeah.
And so it's, talking to them earlier and getting them under the understanding of go slow, enjoy things, explore what you like and don't like, but don't get this idea in your head that having sex, you have to have the 12-inch penis. You have to have, the squirting all over if you're a girl. Like
Mhm.
all these things, it's just not reality. And so I
Yeah.
think kind of that would be my biggest takeaway from what the kids have, the feedback that they've given me is just like they want to know what's normal and true and good for them as 15, 16, 17-year olds.
Yeah. Yeah. You bring up, I mean, because I think back, I mean, my mom was in healthcare too. So I remember
Mhm.
like my conversations with my mom being like, here's this medical book, here's the information that you get, like you said, like there is so much more readily available. And even just watching, like over the last couple of years, like watching my kids react to different things on TV, or I can't remember recently we were watching something and the guy said something about like feeling a little aroused or something. And you could see which of my kids comprehended it versus which ones weren't, they hadn't gotten there yet. And just that awareness of like they are seeing so much more than we ever did. Like
Mhm.
the exposure to information, the exposure to different styles, different things, different like it's just so different. I think it is like just having these conversations. It's more than just having the birds and the bees conversations that maybe we
Mhm.
had when we were young, but it's
Right.
like there is a much deeper, more intense layer that needs to happen today
Yeah. Well,
because
I mean,
it's
just looking
different.
at what we grew up with, when we were little, we had the Brady Bunch. They were one of
Hmm.
the first couples on TV to even be shown in bed together, and they were fully clothed head to toe, right?
Yeah.
They never showed anything sexy or anything. By the time I was in high school, Dawson's Creek was on, and
Mm-hmm.
they're teenagers sleeping in the same bed. And now it like soft porn is on regular TV now. So
Mm-hmm.
just the progression of even what is acceptable to have on in the TV in your living room with your family
Yeah.
has changed, let alone
Yeah.
what's available on the internet and on their phones.
Totally.
It's insane. I mean, we didn't have Snapchat where that picture disappears, and yet the picture does not actually disappear. And so these kids need to know that whatever is taken on
Yeah.
Snapchat is stored on Snapchat forever.
Yeah.
And so if you're sending things that you probably shouldn't be, they are still out there, even if you think they're deleted.
My daughter and I've had that conversation, like when she hit sixth grade, even just the like, not just pictures, but the whole idea of like you text something to a friend, like you text Sally about Jane. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, you have no knowledge that Sally's not going to text message or snap a
Yep.
picture of that and then
Screenshot. Yep.
forward it to Jane. You have to
Right.
be aware of what you're sending. But anyway, this is a whole other conversation
That
about
is.
like
It is.
technology.
Yes.
I mean, it's just that highlighting like the knowledge, the information, the access that kids have today is
Mm-hmm.
so different. Like I remember in school, in college, I was in Seattle, away from my family. Like I had school. I don't even think the school had like, I'm sure they did have healthcare on campus, but I don't know much about it because I went to a private school.
Mm-hmm.
But I was having some like hormone issues. Like my period was wonky or things like that. And so I had no idea where to go, like no
Mm-hmm.
idea. And so I was like, I'm going to go to a Planned Parenthood.
Yeah.
I felt so ashamed and so uncomfortable going to a Planned Parenthood because the only thing I had known of Planned Parenthood growing up is like abortions. Like that was
Yeah.
the only, in this like you said, that's negativity, the stigma, like
Mm-hmm.
all the stuff around it. I was so ashamed going into that office. And even though I was just going for like hormones and labs and like, what the hell is wrong with me type of stuff. And they drew a bunch of labs and I passed out in the waiting room on the way out the door. And I took out an entire plant. I literally woke up on the floor of the waiting room with everybody around me and like the plants all gone, the table, like the coffee table, like everything's gone. And I was mortified. Like I had that feeling of like, what do people think that I just did back there? Like that feeling and just how strong that is, that like sense of feeling of like, in order to get the care that I needed, I had to go through this like smokescreen of like such an embarrassing stigma about it. And I think that's one area, but like what you're talking about, like people I think have that all through life, like, like 40, at 60, at 70, at whatever. And I think it is becoming more talked about. Like my husband just got like one of those hymns, brochures in the
Yep.
mail or whatever. Like I think people are talking about it a little bit more, but it's still one of those stigmas. So like what I know you like to poke the bear in conversations,
Mm-hmm.
but like what are something that like everybody in society, like listening, like what should we be doing to help create these conversations, to like help people get the care that they need, to break the stigma, break the status quo? Because I think it does come in time, right? The culture shift takes a little bit of time, but it takes small little incremental shifts over that time that are really going to make that difference.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is setting your judgment aside.
Mm.
Just because you have a friend who participates in an open relationship doesn't mean that you have to.
Uh-huh.
That's fine. Ask them questions, support them, be like, oh, okay, how does that work for you? Or is that more fulfilling for you guys? What led you down that path? Like, how is that, being open to the fact that not all of us are the same. What works for one person isn't going to work for the other. And it's okay to be super vanilla and only want your one position and your one partner forever. And it's super okay to be in an open relationship in BDSM in whatever, as long as you are safe and you are consenting and you are with a person who is keeping you safe and is also consenting. That's the biggest thing. Beyond that, it's learning, asking questions, and just keeping your judgment to yourself. I
Yeah.
think it's easy to hear someone say, oh yeah, last night I was up on the St. Andrew's cross and go, oh my gosh, how are you telling me that? Instead, be like, cool, did you like it? Or what the hell's a St. Andrew's cross? Like, whatever, I think it's so much more important to, catch yourself and not be so pushing forward the stigmas that we were taught and
Uh-huh.
learning. Hey, you know what? Maybe somebody's going to hear something and be like, oh, I wonder what it would be like to be, strapped down and have forced pleasure and like things like that. And so I do think that just being open to the conversation and open minded, listening, learning, and that's fine. If you walk away from talking to me and you're like, I am never doing what Steph does. Like, man, that girl, she is wild. Or maybe I'm too vanilla for you and you need more wild, like that's fine. But I'm me and this is what works for me and you're you and that's what works for you. And that mutual respect of what works for us is different is
Mm-hmm.
huge and goes such a long way.
Mm-hmm. And I would say it's much harder or it's much easier said than done. Like it's one of those things that, and some of us are probably better at it than others. Like I'm one of those people that like has a really hard time filtering like facial expressions
Yeah.
sometimes, right? So like even without having the like judgment forthcoming, it's like inside I'm like, whoa, I'm not sure how to respond to this. What is this? Like what, and that's oftentimes misperceived on the other
Sure.
side, right? And so
Absolutely.
it's one of
And
those.
I think too, like even within a couple, right?
Mhm.
You can have say, hey, you know, when I was watching porn, I saw that they were kind of having this like power struggle dynamic and like that really turned me on. Like, what do you think about that? And your partner's
Mhm.
like, I don't know. Well, maybe you go watch that video together. Maybe you take one of the online quizzes that helps you find your thing. Maybe you read a book together. Maybe you try instead of going straight to bondage, let's just get a tie out and start with tying our wrists. Something, but as long as you are able to have that conversation, and if it is really difficult for you to have that conversation, you don't even know where to start, then that's where you go see a sex therapist, a sex coach, something like that. There's ones that work with you individually. There's ones that work with couples, and you can dive through what that needs. I have someone in my life whose husband really needs torture. Something in his past happened. I don't ask the questions because it's none of my business, but he needs that outlet and it makes her very uncomfortable. That's fine. Let's go to a therapist and talk about how we can do that. Do we hire him a dominatrix and set limits on, maybe no penetration, you don't orgasm, things like that, but he can go get that from someone else because that makes you uncomfortable? Or are there certain things that you would be comfortable with and it's enough for him and you guys can do that together then? So having the open-mindedness to talk with a professional to get through some of those difficult conversations is really, really important.
Yeah. And I think that goes, I mean, the other day, even one of my kids said something about like, I said something about going to see a therapist and they said, "Oh, I'm not broken enough to go see a therapist." And I was like, "You don't have to be broken to see a therapist. Like if I had the money, I would be seeing a therapist every single week. Like I would
Yeah.
just be going all the time." And
Yeah.
so I think that there is even a stigma around that like
There is.
if I have to go have help, if I have to ask for or go get a therapist for this, then like there must be something wrong with me. And I think there's even these layers and these hurdles of stigma that society has created around even seeking help, which I think my guess is that in this, so there's people that are listening to this podcast that are in that area of like, we're not like something's not working. We could use some support. We could use some help. We could use some resources, but maybe it's
Yes.
not significant enough that we actually like feel that like have to go get help. Like I have to do this. Maybe there's this
Mm-hmm.
like almost silent suffering, I guess is a good way to put it. Like it's
Yeah.
not so bad that we're like, our marriage is breaking apart or our, like relationship is doomed or things like that. But there's this element of something's not working and it's not
Mm-hmm.
satisfying. I'm feeling unfulfilled. And I think even too, I think our generation too, like or I would say probably more of the generation before us, there's this sense of like life is unfulfilling. Like you can go through life feeling unfulfilled. And I think I heard somebody even say recently, they're like, I really appreciate that the divorce rates are higher today because it means that people aren't staying in things that are unfulfilling for them. Like they're willing to seek out happiness and they're willing to be happy. Whereas I think previous generations, it was so focused on just stay married, figure it out, work it out, like stay in these relationships that maybe are not healthy. They're not great. And I think there's some element of that like, I think our generation, I'd be honest, is like probably one of those generations. It's like, I am willing to actually do the work to create the
Mm-hmm.
healing. I'm willing to pursue and kind of get myself uncomfortable and get outside of my box and like seek the help. But maybe there are some people that are like still in that space of silently suffering and kind of feeling like, this is just the way it is? And what would you kind of like put out there as like, these are things to watch for, to know maybe, hey, it's time to go look for some support, whether it's from somebody like you, more in the medical space, or whether it's more in the emotional like space, or if it's more in the sex therapy space, or like what would that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing I would say is getting help is not just for a sex addiction, a porn addiction, and things like that. The sex therapists help with so many aspects of sex. It is not just a, like you said, I'm broken, let me go get fixed. It's, I want better. I want more intimacy. I want more pleasure. I want to know what really makes me tick. I want my partner and I to get to that next level of communication where we can get on that same page. For me, medically, I would say if you're having pain with sex, if you or your partner are having ED issues, if you are having changes because of menopause or postpartum or anything like that, with changes in lubrication, changes in elasticity, your organs not in the right spots anymore. Sometimes we have prolapse, different things like that. That's definitely the time to come see a urologist, a gynecologist, a urogynecologist. There's a bunch of us in this space that can help you. And we can get you on, let's say, perimenopause, menopause, we can get you on some vaginal estrogen. That's going to put all kinds of good stuff back in your tissues, better blood flow, better thickness, better lubrication, all of these things that make sex more pleasurable then. If you or your partner are struggling with ED, then let's talk through that. Let's figure out, is it psychological? Is it medical? Or is it a combination of both? And, if you and your partner are not hitting the same mark, right? Like, I heard a study one time that said, a couple who's been married their entire lives will, in their total of their marriage, both be in the mood at the same time, like 8 times. 8 times in your entire marriage are you both like just like ready to go right at the same moment, both horny, both, otherwise it's one person or the other is kind of in the mood and you either go with it or you don't. So if you have mismatched libidos, that's a great time to come get help. And that may be from a sex therapist. It might be medical, because if I have a guy with low testosterone, their libido is shot. If I have a woman whose hormones are all over the place, whether it's different variations of her cycle or different times in her life, we can help you manage that and figure that out. And some of it just comes down to helping that couple have the conversations between themselves. But even if you're single and you're like, man, I just don't get turned on like I used to. Like, I used to walk into the grocery store and be like, dang, you're looking good, like, okay, I could have that guy, like, whether you did anything about it or not, right? Like, but
Yeah.
you had those reactions. And now you're like, that looks like a lot of work. Like, so like we can help with that. We can help you get your mojo back. So yeah, there's definitely different reasons to see different aspects of us in
Uh-huh.
healthcare. But the nice thing is we all know what we are capable of caring for and when to refer you to the next person. So I can take care of your lubrication needs and things like that. But if you have a lot of tension in your pelvis, I'm going to send you to a pelvic floor physical therapist. If you have been raped in your past and you're struggling to have sex again and be intimate with your partner because that memory keeps coming back, I'm going to send you to a sex therapist to be able to work through that and do some trauma help with that. And flip flop. If you go to a sex therapist thinking that, I just need to talk through my thoughts and I'm changing, I'm depressed, and they're like, okay, but like, I'd also like you to go see a menopause specialist to get your hormones checked and make sure that that's all balanced, because they go hand in hand.
Uh-huh.
So it's really nice that we all kind of, I have a network that I refer to them, they refer to me. And a lot of us within the Sexual Medicine Society have that.
Yeah. It's interesting. Like, and I don't know, one, I just turned 40 this year. So I don't know if it's my algorithm, but I feel like I'm getting way more conversations and ads and things like that talking about all of these things that are changing as women age and as we progress. And this, like the hormone replacement therapy and like the conversations around that. Like, I feel like it's becoming this very well talked about conversation, but I think it's probably just my algorithm. Like, I don't know.
It's both. It's truly both. Women were not required to be in research studies until like the 90s. Before that, we were considered small versions of men.
Yep.
right? That's not true. We're completely different. There has not been reimbursement codes and funding for menopause research up until like the
Uh-huh.
last 10 to 12 years. And so now those studies are concluding and we're getting better evidence. And now we're coming out with appropriate studies. The Women's Health Initiative that was released back in 2002 that said everybody's going to get cancer if you go on estrogen, the own authors of that study have redacted that.
Yeah.
But of course, that doesn't get published as much. And it's easier to scare people and keep them afraid of estrogen than it is to say, hey, we were wrong. That was estrogen that was coming from a pregnant female horse's urine. So it was not bioidentical. It did not work in us the way our estrogen worked. And it did cause problems.
Uh-huh.
But the stuff that we use now is not the same and it doesn't cause problems. You are not at increased risk of cancer with using hormone replacement. You are not at increased risk of dementia or strokes or blood clots or all these things for the vast majority of women, right? Every
Yeah.
woman still needs to be checked out because there are
Yeah.
some genetic factors that go into this. But vast majority, it's actually cardioprotective, brain protective, kidney protective. There's so
So,
many things that hormone therapy really does for women, and it's incredible. The rate of dementia in women is much more significant than men. And what we have found out through research and watching MRIs of the brain is that going through menopause and the lack of estrogen propels women towards dementia. And men don't go through that. Their estrogen is stable throughout their life. And so it's really interesting when you start breaking all of this down, how much support women really need in the second 2/3 of their lives or last third of their life, depending on when they go through things. And the length of time that we go through perimenopause can be 10 to 15 years.
yeah.
So you have a 35-year-old who's talking about hot flashes, believe her. She might really have them.
Yeah.
I'm 41 and I am fully in perimenopause and I have people tell me that I'm too young for that. Okay, well, that's great. But
Uh-huh.
tell that to my inability to sleep well, my night sweats, my brain fog, my changes of motivation and all of those things that come with it. You got to get your hormones balanced to help deal with that. And so I love that it's becoming a popular topic. And I don't think that it's a fad. I don't think it's, just because Oprah did a special on it, it's something to talk about. It's just that it's finally gotten its spot in history to
Uh-huh.
truly come to light. And we have enough research and enough powerful women that are ready to stand up and say, we're not going to suffer anymore. And we're going to treat people so that they don't have to go through a third or more of their life suffering with this stuff.
Totally. Yeah. And I even think too, like, I mean, just in one, it's like it has to do a lot with history, but our lifespans are so much longer today
Mhm.
too than they were even decades ago. And how that is, now it's a significant, much more part of our lives that we're seeing that progression. We're seeing those changes over time that maybe we didn't have before. And I don't know. I saw this on Instagram the other day and I was like, I need to go kind of dig and look at it. But I had seen that, I mean, a majority of medical studies initially get started on mice. And it said that mice don't menstruate and don't have
Interesting.
that same like menstrual cycle sort of element and like hormones. And yet, like all the initial birth control studies and like a lot of the studies that we do are on mice. And like they start out with mice and how that whole reproductive system is so different for mice than women. And I was like, that's fascinating because the menstrual cycle and those hormones make such a huge difference for women. And yet, if we're studying it on animals or things initially that don't even go through that same cycle, how are we taking that same research and crossing it across, you know? But I think what it's like you said, like what I've seen is that there's just not, I get a lot of pushback around cycle syncing
Mhm.
and people saying like it doesn't exist, it's not real, it's not this, it's a fad, it's all these things. And I think there is some element of like what people are doing with it or and like how they're using it. Like I'm a firm
Mhm.
believer that we should not be using it as a crutch is like we can't do certain things. I really believe it's more of like how are you going to use this to empower how you
Mhm.
show up in the world and what you do and things like that. But I think a lot of people do use it in that other crutch sort of vein and that's where it gets a lot of bad talk and taboo. But I think a lot of it is like there just is not the research. Like there is not enough information out there about how our brain changes throughout the cycle with estrogen versus progesterone and how it changes if with testosterone and like how all of the like we just don't have enough of the data that I think, like you said, I think as more money and research goes into that area, we will start to see that and support that in much different ways. And like you, I think every woman would be able to tell you there are certain times of the month that they feel more brain foggy, that they feel more libido, they feel whatever. And yet a lot of people say like, no, the cycle syncing doesn't exist. But yet most
Mhm.
women are like, no, I can feel this. Like I can
Yes.
feel the changes, right?
Yep.
Where would you like to see, like if you could wave a magic wand, where would you like to see like this conversation in 5, 10 years from now?
So much more openness about it. And that when you're talking about this with your girlfriends, you don't have to be hush hush at the restaurant. You can just have your open conversation. That sex toys are not considered taboo, that this is a tool, that men don't feel ashamed that their partner wants to use a vibrator in addition to sex because we get off differently. And I think I want sexual medicine to just be a norm. So, like, my dream would be to have an industrial park or building or something to that effect filled with different aspects of sexual health. And so you have a urologist, a gynecologist, maybe your Brazilian wax lady is in there, maybe a boudoir photographer, definitely pelvic floor physical therapists, sex therapists, different sex coaches and breath work, and all of these different things that can improve your sexual health and sexual function because pleasure, we should all be getting pleasure out of this life. And sexual intimacy is one of the greatest ways that we can experience pleasure, both in and of ourselves and in our relationships. And I think a lot of us forget to self explore as well. And so I think encouraging that and encouraging women who maybe were brought up in a way that masturbation was not okay. You weren't to do it. You don't touch yourself. Well, how am I supposed to know what feels good if I don't touch myself to tell you as my partner what feels good to me?
Yeah.
And self exploration isn't just about reaching the orgasm. It's just about loving yourself and what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and exploring that. And I would love for that to be more mainstream and more acceptable as well. I mean, if you are having a conversation about sex with your girlfriends, it's rarely about masturbation, right?
Uh-huh.
You're already
Uh-huh.
barely talking about sex. And then when you do, it's just partnered sex. You're not talking about, well, yeah, well, last night I had this great session. I know I'm very open like that. So I tell my friends and they're like, oh my gosh, Stephanie. But it should be open and easy to talk about. And, I think that would be my hope for sexual medicine is just that we become more mainstream. You come to see us just as much as you would your cardiologist or your neurologist. And we really just increase the pleasure for people, both
Uh-huh.
individually and in partnerships.
Yeah. So good. Yeah, it's interesting. So like at my retreat this year, we did a whole kind of thing around like womb energy and like
Mhm.
how for women, so much of our like creative process, our life giving, like our desire, like everything of that, like kind of is in this like womb energy kind of portal type of thing, more on the spiritual side. But we talked a lot about like pleasure and about how so many women, either through infertility, through rape, through horrible like interactions, like a lot of things have like this cut off, like we don't want to tap into that space, like that space is unsafe, it's unhealed, it's shameful, it's whatever, like all of the stories and things that we have around it. And I talk a lot about that too, like if we're trying to use our menstrual cycle, if you have like a negative relationship with
Mhm.
that part of your body, how are you really intending to like bring forth life with it and use it and leverage it? And so we had this whole conversation around pleasure and self pleasure and like what that looks like. And it was fascinating to like have this real open conversation with other women and see the shift in even just the depth of relationship that happened with the women in that room going forward for the rest of the weekend because they felt safe enough to open up for those conversations. And I think that, I mean, even just looking at that, like creating the safety in relationships for you to be able to open up to your friends like that level of depth of safety in that is a whole other conversation, but that could transform so many women's lives too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This was so good. I know we could probably
Yeah.
keep talking forever, but is there anything you feel like you want to make sure we include in that maybe feels like it left out or wasn't complete?
The only thing I would say is, I talked a little bit about estrogen. It's such a game changer. If you are starting to feel, the changes of perimenopause, menopause, if you're getting recurrent UTIs, pain with sex, more frequency and urgency than normal, things like that, talk to your provider, whether it's your primary care GYN, urologist, about some vaginal estrogen. It is truly a game changer. It improves your vaginal health, your urethral health, bladder health tenfold. And there is not enough people pushing for it at this point in time. And so you need to ask for it if you haven't been offered it. It does not increase your risk of cancer. It does not increase your risk of stroke. It's locally absorbed, and it is just life-changing for a lot of women. So that would be a huge takeaway. And then the only other thing I would say is just be open. Be open with your girlfriends, be open with your partner, talk, ask questions, take away the judgment, and just enjoy learning and being open-minded about some other areas of sex that maybe you haven't explored yet.
Yeah. So good. Yeah. It's actually been one of those things where I like keep getting ads for the MIDI health or whatever, and they don't accept my insurance because I have an HMO and stuff. But I was like, this is probably something I need to talk to my doctor about. Like just the little changes that I've seen over probably since 35, like you said, they're not significant enough where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm in perimenopause. Like these are the normal symptoms that everybody talks about, but little things like gaining weight around my midsection. I'm like, no matter what I've done, I've had like weird heart stuff. And like, I've gone to the doctor every time, I like went in for like a hypertensive urgency sort of thing. And then it's like gone and they can't figure it out and all these things. So I'm like, I'm seeking care, but I don't think I've actually directly said like, hey, do we think this could be related to perimenopause? And nobody else has ever brought it up. Like any of the symptoms that I've ever brought up, like that's not something that they're jumping to. And I think it just goes towards like what you talked about. There's one, the lack of research that's out there, but two, it's not getting widely disseminated amongst everybody. And there's certain things in my area that's like, it's kind of a little bit more of the fringy conversations. This is probably one of those ones. It's still in that, like, it's not a mainstream like practice.
Well, it's not even taught. I mean, that's the biggest thing is menopause is not taught. Hormone replacement therapy is not taught, not in med school, not in nurse practitioner school, not in PA school. So right now I took it on myself to get a bioidentical hormone training class. I'm going through it right now. I put my own money into doing it. And because I want to help not only myself and friends, but my patients, I want to be a supportive person for them. Finding a menopause specialist right now is difficult.
Yeah.
And you can go on the menopause websites. There's, the National Menopause website. There's Menopause Society of North America. There's different ones that you can go on that do have resource lists that you can find somebody in your area. But yeah, it's not taught. We as providers have to seek out the education to be able to help our patients.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that.
You're welcome.
And then being an educational spokesperson for other people and kind of advocating, whether through your podcast or your social media or guesting on other podcasts and things like that. So if there's somebody here that wants to kind of follow along with you and find you and learn more about what you're doing, or if they want to reach out to you anyway, where can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a website. It's betweenthe.sheets.with.drz.com. And then on social media, the handle is Between the Sheets with Dr. Z also. So those places, and then any of your sites that you listen to podcasts on, it's called Between the Sheets. And it's a really fun podcast that we can talk about a lot of different stuff. So if you are local, I work for Chesapeake Urology here in Maryland. So you could find me as a provider as well.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on. This was a pleasure. And I agree with you. It's like this one of these conversations that just needs to keep talking about. And even if as like every person listening right now, if we just took one little action step to make it something that we talked about, like whether it's with your partner or with a friend or whatever, like if we all just committed to having like one extra conversation, the mass amounts of ripples that would have of like over time. Like, we don't necessarily need to like air everything all at once if that's feeling really uncomfortable, but can we just take one conversation and one step forward and move things forward in just one little way would be huge.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.